I'm Anię, 32.
For 15 years, I'd lived a lie, convinced I'd outrun my past. That illusion shattered last Tuesday at my sister's engagement party. My estranged Uncle Leo, a man unseen in decades, raised his glass. His toast, to secrets finally finding their way home, struck me like a physical blow, signaling the end of everything. How fast can a world collapse? Instantly. My mother's terrified glance, my fiancé's sudden pallor, and the chilling certainty, my escape, was a trap. The entire truth unspooled in those agonizing seconds. My mother, still beaming, adjusted her pearl necklace, utterly unaware her polite smile was about to unravel her carefully constructed life. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments.
I want to know where you are right now.
The invitation came through my sister, which was the first warning. Paige does not send things. She forwards them with a note attached. So you understand the favor she is doing you. This one landed in my work inbox on a Tuesday between a freight contract and a payroll approval. Dad's retirement dinner the 14th. Try to dress appropriately. His bosses will be there, so please don't make it weird. I read it twice, then I laughed alone in my office with the door shut. The laugh surprised me. I had not expected the timing of it or the cruelty of how funny it was. His bosses will be there. I run a company called Meridian Industrial Group. We are not large the way people picture large, but we are large enough that I had not signed my own paychecks by hand in 9 years. I employ people who employ people who employ people. And somewhere down in that long, quiet chain sat a tool and fastener plant in a town called Brennan, Ohio, where my father had clocked in for 40 years. Paige did not know that.
My mother did not know that.
My father, who had spent 4 decades inside that building, did not know it either. I closed the email. I did not reply right away, because I had learned a long time ago not to react to my family in real time. Instead, I looked at the date on my calendar, the 14th, and I made a decision that felt small and turned out not to be. I was going to go, and I was going to go as myself with my real name on the place card, and let the evening do whatever it was going to do. For 12 years, my family had introduced me with a single sentence, and they had perfected it the way some families perfect a casserole. She bagged college. She drives a truck or something. She never really found her footing. The phrasing shifted depending on the audience, but the verdict stayed the same. Ingrid is the one who didn't make it. At first, I corrected them. I would say gently that I owned the truck and then several trucks and then a building. Each correction landed like a stone in a pond and sank without a ripple. My mother would smile and change the subject to Paige's anniversary or the new countertops. So, I stopped. Here is the part people misread, so I want to be clear about it. I did not stop because they wore me down. I stopped because I finally understood that I was asking the wrong people to grade my paper. You do not keep handing your homework to a teacher who has already written the F before you turned it in. I had a company to build and a route to drive and a payroll to meet on Fridays. And none of that cared whether my mother approved. So I let them keep their story. I let it harden into family fact. I came home for the holidays I could not skip, ate the ham, complimented the countertops, and drove back to my own life by Sunday night. It was not surrender. It was the cleanest kind of distance there is. What I did not understand yet, what it took a banquet hall and 80 witnesses to teach me, was that some stories do not just sit there quietly. Eventually, a family tells theirs to the one person in the room who can prove it false. I want to take you back 12 years to the kitchen table where the story actually started. I was 22. I had left the state university 9 credits short, not because I was failing, but because I had found something that paid and made sense to me, and snorts the classroom no longer did. I was hauling parts on contract for a supplier 2 counties over, sleeping in the cab between runs, and I had done the math on buying my own box truck. The numbers worked. I needed a cosigner for a small loan, $8,000, because nobody lends to a 22-year-old with no history. So, I brought it home. I wrote the whole plan out by hand on a yellow legal pad. The routes, the margins, the payback schedule, neat as I could make it, and I laid it in front of my father after dinner. He read it the way he read everything, slow with his reading glasses down his nose. Then he picked up a pen and wrote 5 words across the bottom of my plan and slid it back. No, get a real job. He signed it the way he signed things. Dad, like it was official. My mother did not even look up from the dishes. She set it to the sink, almost bored, like a fact about the weather. She never amounted to much, and she never will. That was the night. Not a fight, not a slammed door, just a verdict delivered over a kitchen sink about a person who had not finished becoming herself yet. I did not cry. I took my legal pad back, folded it into quarters, and put it in my wallet. I have carried it for 12 years, not to stay angry. I will tell you later what I carry it for, because it matters more than you think right now. I got the loan another way through a credit union and a man named Ed who liked my numbers more than my pedigree. And I bought the truck. That is the whole origin. No inheritance, no rich boyfriend riding in to save the day. No lucky break that fell out of the sky. There was one truck, then a second, then a third when I hired a driver I trusted. There were 2 winters I nearly lost everything. Once to a blown engine, and once to a client who went bankrupt owing me for months. Both times I climbed out alone because I had already learned not to expect a hand from home. I slept in that cab more nights than I want to count. I learned freight, then warehousing, then the quiet art of buying small suppliers who were tired and had no one to leave the business to. I would keep their people, keep their name on the door, and fold the back office into mine. That is how Meridian grew. One tired little company at a time until the holding structure on paper looked nothing like the girl with the yellow legal pad. If I have a flaw, and I have several, it is that I carried all of it by myself for so long that I forgot how to let anyone in. I built walls high enough to keep my family out, and then I lived inside them alone. I told myself that was strength. For a long time, it even looked like strength. But a wall does not know the difference between the people you are keeping out and the parts of yourself you are walling in. I would learn that too eventually, just not in time to do it the easy way. 3 years before that retirement dinner, Meridian made the largest move it had ever made. We acquired a holding group called Callaway, a sleepy mid-market portfolio that owned a handful of regional industrial businesses across the Midwest. I had been circling it for 2 years. It was a share purchase, which matters. So, let me explain it the way I wish someone had explained it to me when I was 22. When you buy a company's shares at the top, you do not buy the desks and the trucks and the people one by one. You buy the whole tree by buying the route. Everything underneath keeps running exactly as it was. Same building, same badge at the door, same boss handing out the same schedules. As far as the floor is concerned, nothing changed at all. And one of the businesses hanging off the bottom of that tree 4 ownership layers down was Brandt Tool and Fastener. Brennan, Ohio, my father's plant. I knew it when I signed. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to pretend it was a coincidence. It was not. I saw his employer in the schedule of holdings, and I felt something I did not have a clean word for, and I bought the company anyway. Then I did not tell a soul in my family, not to set a trap. I want you to understand that part because it is the hinge the whole night turns on. I did not stay silent to spring something. I stayed silent because I had stopped explaining my life to people who had already decided what it was. They had their story. I had a business to run. The fact that their story and my business now shared a building was for 3 years just a private piece of irony I carried, folded up small, right next to a yellow legal pad. The summer before the party, I went home for my aunt's anniversary, and my mother pulled me into the kitchen the way she always did, by the elbow, with a smile aimed at the other room. The smile was for them, the grip was for me. Now, when people ask, she said, low and pleasant. We don't tell them what you do, Ingrid. It gets complicated, and it makes people uncomfortable. Just say you're in logistics and leave it there. I looked at her. I could have told her right then exactly how uncomplicated it was. I could have said the words that would have ended 12 years of this in one breath. I did not. I said, sure, Mom. Logistics. And I went back out to the deck and ate potato salad and let her run her evening the way she liked to run everything. People think I should have spoken up, maybe. But I genuinely did not need a backyard full of her friends to know what I had built. Their applause would not have made my Fridays any easier, so I let her have it. I treated my own silence like a kind of mercy, like I was sparing her the discomfort. That was the lie I told myself for years. And it sounds noble until you say it out loud. Here is what I had wrong, and it took me until that banquet hall to see it. I thought silence and strength were the same thing. They are not. Silence is just a closed door. Sometimes a closed door protects you, and sometimes it lets a person stand on the other side of it and rewrite who you are to a room full of strangers while you politely say nothing and pass the potato salad. The retirement dinner was not a small thing, and that is important to understand. My mother had been planning it for 2 months. It was held at the Brennan Banquet Hall, the nice one with the chandeliers people in that town save for weddings. And there were close to 80 people on the list. 40 years is a long time, and the plant turned out for it. Floor guys, line leads, the front office, my father's old crew. My mother's church friends came too, the ones whose opinions she had organized her whole life around. Paige came with her husband Tom. There was a banner on the little stage, Roy Hill, 40 years of service, and a slideshow on a loop, and a microphone set up for the toasts my mother had scripted. She had built the evening into a monument to a respectable family, headed by a company man, with one daughter, the accountant, and the other daughter. Well, we don't tell people what she does. I drove in that afternoon and checked into the Brennan and off the highway because I am a guest in that town now, not a resident, and I wanted my own door to close at the end of the night. I hung the good coat. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a while, and I thought about the one detail no one in that banquet hall knew, the detail I had checked before I came. The plant's general manager would be there. His name was Dale Conroy. I had sat across a conference table from Dale Conroy every quarter for 3 years. I knew exactly what he looked like, and I knew that the moment he saw my face, the careful story my family had built was going to meet the one man who could read the org chart. I almost didn't drive up that night. 12 years of being the family's cautionary tale will do that to you. But something told me to put on the good coat and go. If you have ever walked back into a room that decided who you were before you arrived, you already know what that drive felt like. Stay with me. The hall doors are about to open. They opened, and my mother found me before I was 3 steps inside. She does this scan top to bottom, shoes to hair, and you can watch the verdict assemble behind her eyes. Oh, good. You came, she said in the voice that means the opposite. Try not to bring up the trucking thing tonight. These are your father's people. Then she steered me toward one of her church friends with a hand on my back. You remember our other daughter, Ingrid? Our other daughter? Not the accountant. The other one. The friend smiled the smile. People smile at a story they have already been told. And I smiled back because I had eaten this exact meal 100 times and knew how to chew it. Paige found me next, half a hug, her eyes going straight to my handbag and then away, like the bag had personally offended her. Tom shook my hand and said nothing, which was the most honest thing anyone said to me all night. And across the hall, near the stage, under his own banner, stood my father, shaking hands, glowing in a way I had not seen on him in years. 40 years of belonging, all lit up on one face. I felt something soften watching him. And then I remembered I was the only person in the building who knew that the company he had given his life to now belonged for layers up to me. Paige cornered me by the drinks table, which is where she does her best work. She had a glass of white wine and a grievance, her 2 favorite accessories. You could have at least chipped in for the catering, she said, not looking at me, looking at the room. Some of us actually carry this family, you know. It's not cheap. Doing the right thing. I said the catering looked lovely. I meant it. She heard it as a dodge, which it partly was. What I had learned about Paige over the years is that her sharpness is not really about me. It is about money, and the math of money was not working for her. I knew the way you know things in a family, without anyone telling you that she and Tom were underwater. There had been a kitchen remodel they could not afford, a second car, a pattern of small loans from mom and dad that everyone pretended were gifts. Paige needed the family hierarchy to stay exactly where it was, with her at the top of the daughters and me at the bottom, because that arrangement came with benefits she was counting on, an inheritance she had already spent in her head, a position as the responsible one that justified the help. If the floor under that arrangement ever shifted, Paige had a long way to fall. So she kept the story polished. She kept me small in it, not out of cruelty exactly, but out of need. Just, she said, lowering her voice as Mom walked past. Don't make tonight about you for once. I told her I had no intention of making the night about me. It was the truest thing I said all evening. I did not have to make it about me. My mother was about to do that herself. My father across the room was holding court with his old crew, and I let myself stand at the edge of it and watch. This was Roy Hill in his element, the version of him the family rarely got at home. He was telling the story about the ice storm of some year I had lost track of when the plant ran a skeleton crew, and he slept on a cot in the break room for 3 nights to keep the line going. The men around him laughed in the right places. They had heard it before. That was the point. 40 years buys you a story everyone already knows and still wants to hear. Someone, one of the younger floor guys, asked him about his kids. You got daughters, right, Roy? My father's face did the thing it does. Paige is an accountant, he said, proud, certain. The words sitting easy in his mouth. Real good with numbers. Married, 2 kids. Then the pause, the small adjustment. And Ingred's. She's in trucking. I think we don't see her much. I think the man had worked inside a building I owned for 3 years, and he did not know what his own daughter did for a living. He was not being cruel. That is what made it land the way it did. He simply had never once been curious enough to find out because the family had a slot for me, and I fit in it. And a filled slot does not get questioned. The only kindness in that circle came from a man named Glenn Tobias, 60, my father's oldest friend at the plant, who had slipped me a butterscotch candy at Christmas when I was 8, and never once treated me like the family's footnote. Glenn caught my eye, broke off from the group, and came over. Ingred Hill, he said, warm. Snorts, tell me what you're really up to these days, and don't say trucking. I told Glenn the short version, that I ran a company now, that it had grown more than I ever expected. And he nodded like a man who had always suspected as much, and was glad to be right.
Knew you had it in you, he said.
You were the only one of those kids who ever actually worked. Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut across the room, gathering everyone the way she gathers everything. All right. Find your seats. We're going to do the toasts before the chicken gets cold. She had a schedule. Of course, she had a schedule. She moved through the hall like a stage manager, positioning people, and I watched her slot Paige in beside the microphone. Paige is going to say a few words on behalf of the children, she announced, and a few of the church friends made the warm little sound people make. On behalf of the children, there were 2 children. One of them was standing right there, uninvited to speak at her own father's retirement. I was not surprised, and I want to be honest. I was not hurt the way I would have been at 22. I did not need the microphone. I have spent my whole adult life learning that the people holding the mic are not always the people holding the power. So I found my seat near the back where they had put me, the family table's outer orbit, and I sat with my water glass and watched my mother conduct her evening. And it was right then, midrangement, that the side door of the hall opened, and a broad man in a gray suit came in, shaking the cold off his coat. Dale Conroy, my father's boss, my general manager. My mother had not noticed him yet. I had. I had sat across a table from Dale Conroy 12 times, maybe more. Every quarter, Meridian runs an owner's review for each business in the group, and the general managers come in and walk us through their numbers. Dale ran Brandt's review. He was good at it, plain-spoken, no spin, the kind of operator I trust. He knew my name. He knew my face. He knew, in a way my own father did not, exactly who signed off on the budget that kept his plant's lights on. So when Dale Conroy stepped into that banquet hall and scanned the room out of habit, the way men like him always do, his eyes crossed mine and stopped. I watched it happen in real time. The small frown of recognition out of context, the mental gears trying to fit the owner of his company into a retirement party in Brennan. He snorts, started to lift a hand. He started, I think, to come over and say hello. The way you greet someone whose conference room you sit in 4 times a year. And I did something I had not planned. I gave him the smallest shake of my head.
Not now. Not yet.
He caught it. He was sharp enough to catch it and decent enough to honor it, and he let his hand drop and turned toward the bar instead, filing the puzzle away for later. I want you to notice what I did there, because it matters for everything that came after.
I was not ambushed that night.
I was not a deer in anyone's headlights. I saw the collision coming from across the room, and I chose deliberately to let it arrive on its own schedule instead of mine. I just did not yet know my mother was about to set the schedule herself. I needed a minute, so I slipped out to the quiet hallway by the coat check, where the chandelier light went soft and the noise of the party dropped to a hum. I took out my wallet and I took out the thing I always carry in it, folded into quarters, soft at the creases from 12 years of being carried, the yellow legal pad page. My 22-year-old handwriting still marched down it. The roots, the margins, the $8,000 plan, neat and hopeful, and a little crooked. And at the bottom in my father's careful hand the 5 words and the signature, "No, get a real job, Dad." And under that smaller in my mother's slanted script, because she had picked up the pad to read it after he set it down, and added her own note like a second opinion on a diagnosis. She never amounted to much. I stood in that hallway and read it the way I read it maybe twice a year. People assume I keep it to feed a grudge. They're wrong. A grudge is a fire you have to keep tending. And I do not have the time. I keep this page for the opposite reason. I keep it so that I will never again make the mistake I made at 22, which was to walk a plan of my own making across a kitchen, and ask the 2 people least equipped to see me to sign off on whether I was allowed to become myself. I did not keep it to stay angry. I kept it so I would never again ask the wrong people to grade my worth. I folded it back along its old creases and slid it into my wallet against the company card that now drew on accounts large enough to make that $8,000 look like a rounding error. Then I straightened the good code, and I walked back into the hall. I did not know it yet, but the page in my pocket was about to come true out loud. By the time I came back in, my mother had noticed Dale Conroy, and you could see the calculation light up her whole face. She knew who he was. Of course, she knew. He was the plant manager, the big boss, the man whose good opinion of the Hill family was worth more to her than almost anything in that room. To my mother, Dale Conroy was not a person. He was an audience. He was the exact kind of important man she had spent 40 years wanting to impress. The embodiment of the respectable world she measured all of us against. And here he was at her event in her hall, with her family arranged around her like a display. I watched her decide. I watched her abandon the toast schedule mid-sentence and start moving through the crowd with purpose, gathering her children as she came. She caught Paige by the arm. She turned looking for me and found me by the coat check door. "There you are," she said, bright and sharp. Come, both of you. I want Mr. Conroy to meet the family." And she began steering us across the floor toward the man in the gray suit, the man I had sat across from 12 times, the man who knew precisely what I did for a living. My mother thought she was walking her daughters toward a man who could be impressed by them. She had no idea she was walking herself toward the one witness in the building who could take her favorite story apart at the seams. I could have stopped it. I want you to know that I could have peeled off, found the restroom, let the moment pass. I did not. I let her steer because some stories, once a family has told them long enough, need to be said out loud in front of everyone to finally die. As we crossed the floor, Paige fell into step beside me and got one more dig in low under the music. "Let Mom do the talking, okay? She's good with these business types. Don't bring up the whole truck thing and make Dad look bad on his night." I told her I would not bring up the truck thing. I said it calmly, evenly, with a kind of flat steadiness that has unsettled my sister since we were girls. Paige has never known what to do with my calm. She reads it as coldness or as scheming because she cannot imagine a version of quiet that is simply not afraid. "I mean it," she said, picking up speed to keep level with me. "Just smile and say logistics." Logistics. There it was again. The family-approved word. The little box they had built for me and kept me folded inside the same way I kept that legal pad page folded in my wallet. The difference was that I knew what was on my page. They had never bothered to read theirs. We were 10 feet from Dale Conroy now. He had set his drink on a high-top table. He had seen us coming, all 3 of us. My mother in the lead with her best company smile, and his expression had gone careful and watchful, the way a smart man's does when he senses 2 stories about to collide and is trying to figure out which one is true. He looked at my mother.
He looked at me.
And I gave him this time the smallest nod. "Go ahead.
It's all right now."
My mother arrived in front of him glowing, her hand sweeping back to present us like prizes, and she opened her mouth to introduce her daughters to the most important man in the room. "Mr. Conroy," my mother said, and her voice had the polish she saved for exactly these moments, the church social voice, the voice that had narrated my smallness for 12 years. "I'm Carol Hill, Roy's wife. I am so glad you could make it. We are so proud of Roy 40 years. Dale shook her hand and said something gracious about my father being the backbone of the plant, and my mother lit up further because praise of the family was praise of her, and this was going exactly the way she had pictured it. A few of her church friends had drifted over to watch the matriarch work the important man. And my father, sensing the gravity shift, came in from the side to stand at the edge of the little circle, near the boss, near his crew, near his wife. The whole cast had assembled without anyone planning it. My mother set her hand on my shoulder. I felt the familiar weight of it, the steering hand, the presenting hand. "And these are our girls," she said. "This is Paige. She's our accountant. Married, 2 beautiful children, just the best mother." Paige did her modest little wave. Then my mother's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on my shoulder, the way it always did right before she said the line, and she turned me a half-degree toward Dale Conroy like she was about to set down a lesser dish and apologize for it. The hall noise carried on around us, glasses and laughter, and the slideshow music. Dale's eyes moved from my mother's face to mine and held there, and I understood with a strange and total calm that I was standing at the exact center of the thing I had carried folded in my wallet for 12 years, and that my mother was about to read it aloud without knowing she held it. "And this," my mother said with a little sigh that she had been performing my whole life, the sigh that did half the work of the sentence, "is our other daughter, Ingrid." She paused for the audience. She always paused for the audience. "She's well, bless her heart. She never really amounted to much. We're honestly not even sure what she does these days. Something with trucks." A couple of the church friends laughed. The soft, indulgent laugh you give a mother being charmingly honest about her disappointing child. Paige smiled into her wine. My father looked down at the carpet the way he always did, removing himself from a thing he would not stop. And me, I did not move. I did not flinch or color or look for the exit. I had heard this sentence in 100 kitchens and living rooms and church parking lots, and I had built an entire life in the spaces between its repetitions. So I simply stood there in my good coat and let it hang in the air of that beautiful rented hall under the chandeliers my mother loved in front of the 80 people she had gathered to admire her family. She never amounted to much. The words went out across the little circle and landed where she aimed them at the feet of the most important man in the room, the man she most wanted to impress with the shape of her respectable life. And Dale Conroy, holding his drink, looked at my mother, and then he looked at me, and something in his face began to change. I watched it move through him, the recognition, the disbelief, the slow arithmetic of a man realizing that the woman being introduced as the family failure was the woman whose conference table he had sat at 12 times. Dale did not say anything right away, and the silence he left was the loudest thing in that corner of the room. He looked at me. He looked down at his phone, which he had pulled halfway out of his jacket pocket out of some reflex, and I knew without seeing it what was on the screen because I had sent the email myself the week before. The quarterly owner's summary, my name at the bottom of it, the name of the woman whose company owned the company that owned the plant that had thrown this party. He looked at the phone. He looked back up at me. And then he looked at my mother with an expression I can only describe as careful. The look of a man who has just realized he is holding a lit match in a room full of something flammable and is trying to decide how to set it down. My mother misread all of it. She read his silence as agreement. She read his stunned face as the polite discomfort of an important man being told a small sad truth about a family's lesser child. And it emboldened her the way it always emboldened her when the room seemed to side with her version. I know, she said, filling the quiet with a little laugh, patting my arm. "We don't like to dwell on it. Every family has one. We just love her anyway. Every family has one." She actually said that out loud with her hand on my arm to the owner of her husband's company. And Dale Conroy set his drink down on the high-top table slowly, the way you set down anything you are afraid you might drop. And he straightened up, and he turned to face my mother fully. I need to pause the moment right here with Dale turning toward my mother, because there is something you have to know that the room did not. Something that had been sitting in my chest all night. The week before this party, in that very owner's review, a document had crossed my desk. It was a retirement package, 40 years of service, full pension as vested, plus a service bonus and a part-time consulting offer that the plant wanted to extend to keep his knowledge on call. The name on it was R. Hill, my father. His exit from the company, his last and largest payday from a life of labor, sat in a folder that required my sign-off because everything at that level required my sign-off. And here is what I did with it. Nothing. I let it move through exactly as the plant's HR had built it on its own merits by the book. I did not pat it out of guilt, and I did not gut it out of spite. Though I will admit, in that quiet hallway with the legal pad page in my hand, I had felt the spite available to me, the way you feel a cliff edge, without stepping off it. I signed it the way I would sign any 40-year employee's package, fair and clean, and I told no one. So, as Dale Conroy turned to correct my mother, I was the only person in that banquet hall who knew that my father's entire retirement, the security of his last chapter, the dignity of his send-off, had already passed, untouched and unharmed. Through the hands of the daughter he wrote, "Get a real job, too." He did not know it. She did not know it. And the strangest part, the part one I'm still sorting out, is that I had protected him before I had any reason to forgive him. I just had not decided yet what to do with that. "Mrs. Hill," Dale said, and his voice was quiet, but it had the kind of quiet that makes people lean in, the kind that turns heads at the next table over. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, a pretty big one." My mother's smile stayed on, but a hairline crack ran through it. "I'm sorry," she said. Dale glanced at me, and it was a real glance, a question, an asking of permission because he was a decent man and he understood, even half a second into this, that something delicate and not his to break was sitting in front of him. I gave him the nod, the last one, the one that said, "Go ahead. It's time." And around us, the little circle had gone still in the way crowds go still without deciding to. The church friends sensing a shift. My father's old crew drifting a step closer. Paige's wine glass frozen halfway to her mouth. My father standing very straight at the edge of it all. The slideshow music played on, oblivious, my father's young face cycling across the screen behind the stage. Dale took a breath. He looked at my mother, this woman who had just called her daughter a failure, to his face. And you could see him choose his words with care, not to wound her, but because the truth he was about to say did not need any help wounding. He was not angry. He was not enjoying it. He was just a plain-spoken man who had been handed an unbearable error and could not in good conscience let it stand. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't think you know who your daughter is." And the whole corner of that banquet hall, 80 witnesses and a slideshow, and a banner that said 40 years of service, went quiet enough to hear the ice settle in his abandoned drink. "Your daughter," Dale said, slow and clear so there could be no mistaking it, "owns the company that owns Brandt. Her company signs my paycheck. Mine and every person in this room who works that plant, including Roy's." He let it sit. He did not embellish it. He did not need to. The sentence did all its own work, rolling out across the circle, and then past it. The way a thing said too loudly at a quiet party travels table to table, ear to ear. "Her company signs my paycheck." My mother's face did something I had never seen it do. The smile stayed frozen because she did not yet have a replacement expression ready, but everything behind it fell away. That she started and stopped. "No, that's not Ingrid isn't trucking." She said it like a person grabbing for the railing on a stair that is no longer there. "She drives as she doesn't drive anything, Mrs. Hill." Dale said, gentle now. "Almost sorry. She's the owner. Meridian Industrial Group. They acquired our parent company 3 years ago. I sit across a table from your daughter every quarter and give her the numbers. We all answer to her. 3 years. The number landed in the circle, and you could watch people do the math, watch them rewind 3 years of this family's certainty and find it had been false the entire time. A church friend put her hand to her mouth. One of the floor guys said audibly, "Wait, the owner?" and looked at me with new eyes. And my mother, who had spent 40 years building her worth out of other people's good opinion, stood in her beautiful rented hall, and felt the whole structure of the evening invert around her, while the daughter she had just dismissed as nothing stood quietly in a good coat and said not one word. My father had been standing at the edge of the circle the whole time, half turned toward his crew. And now he turned the rest of the way around slowly, the way a man turns when he is afraid of what he will see if he turns fast. 40 years of being a company man, of measuring a person's worth by the steadiness of their paycheck and the realness of their job. All of it came to rest in the look on his face. Because the real job he had told me to go get, the one he wrote across the bottom of my plan in his careful hand, was the thing now signing his. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in 12 years, which I suppose he was not the slot I had been filed into. Me, Ingred, he said, and his voice was not the certain voice from the ice storm story. It was small. You 3 years. The whole hall seemed to wait on my answer. I thought about all the ways I could have said it. The cruel way was right there, available, sharpened by a decade of his glancing past me. I did not take it. I just looked at my father at his proud retirement banner and his slideshow and his crew and his crack of a voice, and I told him the plain truth, level and quiet, the way I tell everyone things now. 3 years, Dad. That was all. 3 years. The man had clocked in and clocked out under my ownership for 3 years, had retired under a package I had personally signed, had told a young coworker just an hour ago that he wasn't sure what his daughter did, and now he knew. And the knowing emptied him out right there in front of everyone he had spent 40 years belonging to in the exact theater of respectability my mother had built to honor him. The room tilted then the way a room does when the official story everyone has been politely agreeing to suddenly cannot be agreed to anymore. The whispering started low and spread. My mother's church friends, the audience she had performed her whole life for, were the first to step back physically a half step each. The way people back away from a thing that is no longer what it claimed to be. I watched one of them, a woman named Pat, who had nodded along to my smallness for years, turn to another and murmur behind her hand, and I knew exactly which direction that murmur would travel through that congregation by Sunday. Paige had gone the color of paper. I almost felt for her. She was watching the family hierarchy she had spent years propping up. The one that kept her at the top of the daughters and justified every loan and every favor collapse in real time in a banquet hall in front of everyone she knew. The math of her whole position had just changed, and she knew it, and she could not say a word. Glenn Tobias, my father's oldest friend, the man who had handed me butterscotch when I was 8, was the only one smiling. He caught my eye across the circle and gave me a slow, private nod, and I swear his eyes were a little wet. And at the center of it stood my mother, the chandeliers she loved blazing above her, 80 witnesses arranged around her, her monument to respectability tilting on its base. She had built the perfect room. She had filled it with the perfect audience, and she had handed them with her own hand on my shoulder the one truth she had spent 12 years burying. Then she found her voice. And the voice that came out was not the church social voice anymore. "This is a stunt," my mother said too loud, and several heads at the nearer tables turned. "This is some kind of stunt. She's done something to embarrass us on your father's night. Of all nights." Her voice was climbing, losing its polish, going ragged at the edges in a way I had almost never heard because my mother's whole power had always lived in her control. She rounded on me, and the church social mask was gone now, and what was underneath it was raw and frightened and furious. "You did this on purpose. You always had to be the center of everything, didn't you? Even as a child, you couldn't just let your father have one night." One night. Her hand was shaking. A few people drifted closer. Not away now. Drawn the way people are drawn to a thing coming apart. "What did you do? Buy the company just to humiliate me? Just to prove some point?" And here is the thing I want you to notice, because it is the whole shape of how this works. As my mother got louder, I got quieter. As she lost her footing, I kept mine. She was doing all the things a person does when the floor gives way. The volume, the accusations, the rewriting of the story in real time to make herself the wounded party. And I was simply standing still in a good coat with my hands folded, letting her show the entire room what she actually was when the performance failed. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. The The power in that corner had already changed hands, and the changing of it did not require me to be loud. It only required me to be exactly as calm as she was frantic. So, I waited until she ran out of breath. And then, in the quiet she left behind, I finally said something. "I didn't do anything to you, Mom," I said. My voice was low, but the hall had gone quiet enough that it carried to the back tables. "I bought a company 3 years ago because it was a good company, and the deal made sense. Your husband worked there. That part one knew. The rest of it, the part where you found out tonight, that wasn't me. That was you." I let that settle. She opened her mouth and I kept going, still quiet, still even. Because I had waited 12 years to say this, and I was not going to waste it by shouting it. I never told a single person in this family what I do. Not you, not Paige, not Dad. For 3 years, I let you keep your story. I drove home. I ate the ham. I said logistics. And I let you tell people your other daughter never amounted to much, because correcting you stopped being worth my time a long time ago.
A beat.
And then tonight, you walked me across this room with your own hand on my shoulder. And you said it to the one man in this building who answers to me. I looked at her, and I was not angry. And I think that was the part she could not bear, that I was not angry. You didn't get caught by me, Mom. You got caught by the truth. It was always going to be standing in whatever room you finally said that sentence in. Somewhere behind me, a chair scraped.
No one else made a sound.
My mother stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I watched her search for a script and find that there wasn't one. That she had performed her way through every social situation for 40 years, and there was no performance for this. For being publicly, completely wrong about the worth of your own child. It was Pat, the church friend, who broke the silence, and she did it almost kindly in a small, unsteady voice, the voice of a woman whose whole understanding of a family had just been rearranged. "Ingred, honey," she said, "what is it that you actually do?" And I realized standing there that no one in that room in 12 years had ever simply asked me that and waited for the answer. So I told them I did not boast. I did not list square footage or revenue or the number of people on the payroll, because the people who need to say those numbers out loud are the people who are not sure of them. I just said it plainly, the way I would say it to a new banker or a new driver. I founded a company called Meridian Industrial Group about 11 years ago. We started with 1 truck. We own and run industrial distribution and supply businesses across 6 states. Now, 3 years ago, we acquired the group that owns Brandt, Tool, and Fastener, where my father has worked for 40 years, and where most of you in this room draw your paychecks. I'm the owner. That's what I do. For years, my mother had said the words, "We don't tell people what you do." Like my work was a stain to be managed, a thing to keep folded out of sight. And now I had said exactly what I do out loud under her chandeliers to her audience. And the only thing that had ever been embarrassing about it was her insistence on hiding it. My mother sat down. Not gracefully. She found the edge of a chair behind her and lowered herself onto it like her legs had stopped being reliable. And my father across the circle put one hand flat on the high-top table to steady himself and looked at the daughter he had filed away and said nothing at all, because there was nothing left to say that would not make it worse. My mother spoke from the chair, and her voice had lost all its volume, and what came out was the closest thing to honesty I had ever heard from her. "Do you have any idea?" she said, not looking at me, looking at the floor. "What it is to raise a daughter people whisper about?" My father drank. The whole town knew. They whispered about us in the pews, about the hill girl whose daddy couldn't keep a job or a promise. I spent my whole life climbing out of that. I could not have it start again. Not with my own child. And for 1 second I saw her. Not the matriarch. Not the verdict giver. But a frightened girl in a church pew who had built a fortress of respectability out of shame, and then spent 40 years defending its walls, even from her own daughter, especially from her own daughter, because I was the crack she was most afraid would let the old water back in. I saw her, and I felt the pull of it, the old daughter instinct to soften, to make it okay, to take care of her feelings the way I had taken care of everyone's. But then she lifted her head and ruined it. "If you had just told me," she said, and the accusation was back, "I could have been proud of you. You took that from me." She turned her own fear into my failure, the way she always had, and the second of sympathy closed like a door. So I said the last thing I came without knowing it to say. You told me to get a real job, Dad, I said, turning to my father. And I let the old words land where they belonged. I went and built the one that signs yours. And Mom, I'm done waiting for either of you to call it enough. I don't need the two of you to sign off on my worth anymore. I haven't for a long time. I just finally stopped pretending I did. I did not storm out. Storming out is for people who lost the room, and I had not lost the room. I set my water glass down on the high-top table next to Dale's abandoned drink, and I buttoned the good coat. The circle parted for me without anyone deciding to part it. I stopped in front of my father on the way. He looked up, and whatever he was bracing for, I did not give it to him. Congratulations on 40 years, Dad, I said. And I meant it because 40 years is 40 years, and it was real. Even if he had spent the last 12 of them not seeing me. I hope you enjoy the retirement as your daughter, not as your owner. Then I walked toward the doors. Dale Conroy caught my eye as I passed and gave me a small grave nod. The nod of a man who knew he had just detonated something and was sorry for the blast radius, but not for the truth of it. And Glenn Tobias fell into step with me to the coat check, the only one who followed. And he squeezed my shoulder at the door. Your dad's a good man and a fool, kid, he said. Always was about this one thing. You did right not being cruel about it. Took more spine than yelling would have. I thanked him. Then I went out into the cold parking lot, and I got into my car, and I drove the few miles back to the Brennan Inn because I am a guest in that town now with my own door to close. I did not cry in the car. I want to be honest about that. I had done my crying about this family years ago in the cab of a truck alone. What I felt driving back was something quieter and much harder to come by. It was finished. 3 days later, my father drove the 2.5 hours to Columbus and showed up in the lobby of Meridian's offices. And now it was his turn to be the one who did not belong in the room. My assistant buzzed up, uncertain. There's a Roy Hill here. He says he's your father. I told her to send him up. He came in holding his hat in both hands, the way men of his generation hold a hat when they are out of their depth, and he stood in the doorway of an office bigger than the house I grew up in and could not find a place to start. He did not lead with an apology. I noticed that he led with worry. I came about the package, he said. The retirement, the pension, and the bonus, and all of it. He turned the hat. I figured after the other night, after what your mother, after all that, I figured you'd wanted to reconsider it, pull it maybe. And I wouldn't blame you. I came to say, I understand if you do. And there it was, the thing that finally told me everything about how my father saw the world, and how he saw me. He had driven all this way, not to say he was sorry for 12 years, but because he was afraid the daughter he had dismissed would do to him exactly what he expected a dismissed person to do. He thought I would punish him with money. He thought that was what power was for, because that was what it had always been for in his world. Sit down, Dad, I said, and he sat on the edge of the chair, hat in his lap. Your package is safe. All of it. The pension, the service bonus, the consulting offer if you want it. He blinked. I signed it myself last week, before any of this happened. I signed it the way I'd sign it for any man who gave that company 40 years, because that's what you are to the company. Fair and clean. I didn't pad it, and I'm not pulling it. It was never going to be a weapon. He sat with that, and I could see it not computing, because in his world power and money were the same thing. And the daughter holding both had every reason to use them on him, and was choosing not to.
Then why?
He started and stopped. I don't understand. Because the package was about your 40 years, I said. It was never about you and me. I keep those things separate. That's the whole job, Dad. Knowing which is which. I let a silence sit, and then I gave him the only hard thing I had left to give, gently because it was true. You're safe here, as an employee. You earned that. But the part of me you'd have to earn back. The daughter part. That one doesn't come with the pension. That one you let go of 12 years ago at a kitchen table. I'm not the one who has to find it again. He left a little while later, still holding the hat. And I do not know yet whether he will do the work or whether he will drive home to my mother and let the version of this where I am the villain harden over the truth. The way their stories always do. That part is not up to me. And I have made my peace with the not knowing. But I will leave you with the thing that 12 years and one banquet hall finally taught me. And I hope it saves you the trouble of learning it the slow way. You can spend your whole life waiting for the people who dismissed you to finally sign off on your worth. Or you can go build the very thing they bow to and stop needing the signature. That's my story. One sentence, 80 witnesses, and a paycheck none of them knew I signed. If you have ever been written off by the people who were supposed to believe in you first, let this be a reminder to go build your own table and stop asking for a seat at theirs.